If you want to look at the image, we'll give Brother Austin time. Does it take a second we're good? Okay. And I need him to adjust the camera a little bit later for sake of example. So I'll just give him a heads up if he wants to either stay up there or go back up. It's up to him. That's his call, but it'll be a brief little example here a little bit later, Lord willing. But I sent a picture this morning. The visuals for me, as I've shared, kind of become a little way to contextualize the lesson that we talk about. And so for this one I chose, because of some thoughts I had for this lesson. I believe it was way earlier in the week, or at some point, a word kind of prompted me pursuing this topic as a lesson. But if you look at that photo, what's going on in that picture? What is going on in that picture? Oh, so right, somebody being lifted up. So in the image, you have an individual on a chair, and if you kind of zoom in on that chair, it's kind of interesting. It's not a throne. Anybody notice what kind of chair? It's an office chair. So it could be, if you take this as a literal, somebody who in business kind of thinks that they're pretty prominent and others should be underneath them. They're lifted up. Maybe, as Brother Mark shared, he's lifted up in himself, thinks highly of himself. But in particular, the others are not only beneath him. What are they having to do? They're having to carry him. Now, he may be the one who thinks he's all something, but his real support comes from the people under him, doesn't it? The ones that he might be tempted to look down upon, the ones that, and I don't know, I'm just using this image as a metaphor. He might be tempted to look down upon those people and think that they're acting, that they are beneath what he said. As someone shared, Sister Tammy sent a text, her daughter said, he's acting like a god. So when people sometimes lift themselves up, and that's a really good thought to kind of lead us to the lesson. So I appreciate her sharing that. This individual who has apparently allowed himself to be so lifted up that he thinks he's above others. He feels he is in a position, and this is the word that kind of became the focus of what I wanted to think about for today. A position of preeminence. I want to think about that word for just a minute. People who suffer from feeling so entitled. Maybe he feels some entitlement that he's made it this far in life and everybody else is underneath him. But really, in a sense, what if they all let go of what they're holding? What would happen to him? He gonna fall, and great will be that fall. He's gonna smack that ground like any of us normal people would. He's not gonna be high and lifted up. But people who kind of suffer from feeling so entitled that they can develop a spirit, unfortunately, of preeminence. They're individuals who, for whatever reason, feel a superiority to others. They feel superior. They feel that they surpass others. Obviously, he feels that he's above them, doesn't he? Even it's so funny in this little image. Look at even just how they're dressed. There's a lot of similarity, but who's the only one wearing a coat? Him, the one who felt lifted up. So there's almost a distinguishing factor could be even just in how they're dressed. And it can be a very difficult spirit to be around somebody, whether it be at work or family or whatever, who has a spirit of superiority, isn't it? That is a hard situation to navigate when they feel they have the preeminence. They have this feeling of entitlement that they're above. And I did want to put a disclaimer. I am not talking about people who have actual authority. Are there people in life who have actual authority? Yes, a cop has a right to exercise authority and say you're breaking the law. A supervisor has the right to say, you've not done this right, I need you to redo it. In church, there's a God-given hierarchy of leadership. That is not what I'm challenging. I hope none of you would think that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not challenging the natural order of leadership that we can encounter in daily living. Far from it. That's not what I'm talking about. Unfortunately, though, can people in leadership roles develop that spirit of preeminence or superiority? They really can. Some people get a little power and it overtakes them. That is particularly scary to me. They have some authority and they take it way too far. But to be clear, I'm not saying that in life no one can have a position that outranks us. That's not what I'm saying. In the home, parents outrank their children in most cases. So there is some authority there. But there are leadership roles that are given to people. And with those roles can come a level of authority. So I just wanted to put a little disclaimer. I just need to pray for those in leadership roles that they do it as best they understand. They need to pray that they also keep themselves in check, don't they? As not to abuse authority. Looking at that picture, you may get a glimpse of someone who is abusing some authority. They just want to be lifted up above everybody else. And as it says, they'll come, as someone shared on my phone, they can come crashing down. So where does preeminence belong? And I think we all know that answer. Who does it belong to? It's not us, is it? You look in Colossians 1 in 12 through 19. Colossians 1 and 12 through 19, if you choose to turn there. Giving thanks unto the Father, which hath made us meet to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in light, who hath delivered us from the power. Now, who did the delivering? He delivered us, didn't he? From the power of darkness, and hath translated us. Who put us into the kingdom? Wasn't us ourselves, was it? Into the kingdom of his dear Son. Who gave us redemption through blood? Wasn't us, was it? In whom we have redemption through his blood, even the forgiveness of sin. Who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature? For by him were all things created, that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible. Whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him. And he is before all things, and by him all things consist. And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have the preeminence. For it pleased the Father that in him should all fullness dwell. So who does the preeminence belongs to him? Now he has a hierarchy of authority and things that are in the Bible and biblical and instituted in the way that he wants things to function. I'm not challenging that by any means. But he is the one who sets things in order. God gave his son as a sacrifice. His son is our intercessor in prayer, isn't he? He's the one we look to for an example. He uses people. He uses people as the mouthpiece to preach the word and all those things, certainly. But in Romans 8, 33 and 34, if you choose to look, Romans 8, 33 and 34, who shall lay anything to the charge of God's elect? It is God that justifieth. Who is he that condemneth? It is Christ that died, yea, rather that is risen again, who is even at the right hand of God, who also maketh intercession for us. He is the one who has the preeminence, the one who sets things in order, who puts people in places where they need to be, who can show people where their talents are best used. If I try to take a preeminent thought and attitude, I could set myself up for failure, couldn't I? If God isn't going to bless me doing this particular work or doing this particular role or this particular duty, but yet I've decided, oh yeah, he wants me to do it. Do I have preeminence over him? Absolutely not. He is the one who knows and should decide. I just need to submit to what his will is. God sets things in order within the church as it pleases him. In 1 Corinthians 12 and 18, but now hath God set the members, every one of them in the body, as it hath pleased who? Him. He is the one who instigates how things need to be, and he can do that as long as people are willing to listen and not take the preeminence upon themselves. So why am I talking about this? Why would I even have this? And I can tell you kind of why it came about. I'm going to tell you why it came about. Why did that word, how did it even become in my vocabulary recently to think about? And then it became the basis for a lesson. I have learned as I have aged, when we hear messages, whether it's in the church building, revival, camp meeting, whatever the case is, when we hear messages, or even during our own private study time, and that's where this happened for me, during my private study time, we all glean something we need from listening, don't we? If we listen with an honest heart, asking the Lord to show me not to listen with preconceived notions always about that I'll understand it and I've heard this before and what should it be. Through the years we've had individuals preach revelation and etc. But then sometimes there's new things introduced, aren't they? Things that others may have had light on, or things that we're not used to, like the rainbow aspect that has been talked about. I don't think I've ever in my time heard that. I've heard several messages and things done, but I don't think I've heard that one. So to go into something, I need to go in with an open heart and open mind, and certainly open ears, willing to hear and listen what God would want me to glean from the lesson. It's very easy to listen to something and already say, well, I ain't gonna have none of that, isn't it? I mean, think about it. We're human beings. Someone can listen to something and already decide, I'm not having any of that. Well, I'm not being very open-minded, am I? What if God is wanting me to listen to something to open my understanding? I need the Lord. I need to let him have preeminence. How dare I decide? Now, don't get me wrong. There's some things we don't want to entertain, right? We don't want to entertain that and listen to certain things because we know it's not healthy. I'm not talking about stuff like that. But I'm talking when I listen to something, I need to have an open heart and open ears to be attentive to what would God want me to learn from it. And when I think about some of the revelation messages, as Brother Allen has taken and doing some things about that, so obviously that's kind of fresh on our minds, hopefully, as we're listening. But one thing that I recognize for myself is I don't want to repeat some of the mistakes and missteps that were made by previous church ages, because we each have a responsibility with the choices and decisions we make, correct? Now, these were spoken about and used as examples as kind of a blanket spirit of that time, and they use the chart and everything to talk about those different time periods. But you know what? I still am an individual, right? And things that may not work on Brother Mark, could the devil try to work it on me? So as I listen to that, and I looked at a slide, Pastor Allen had it, I believe, right there. And if I'm remembering right, it was when he was discussing the age in regards to Ephesus. And do y'all remember, does anybody remember this? And it had a list, and it was kind of like maybe the charges against them, the things they'd fallen prey to, the things that were concerned. Y'all remember that? They were kind of in a table and went across, and they were listed. Now, why does that stand out to me? Because that's what God needed me to glean from the lesson. They left their first love. Does that have to only happen then? No, it hit me. And this is what I told Rhonda Ray later. I don't want to fall prey to that same spirit that was working during that time. That is left for my learning. Danny, you better be careful. Don't you leave your first love, buddy. Now, someone else in here may never even be tempted to think that. And not that I'm being tempted necessarily for certain things, but that is something that hit me. You can take something from the past, but how can it help you in the present? How can you make it present day? History was not my favorite subject in school. Now, I love teaching social studies. I really do. I love it. As a matter of fact, I had such a general distaste for history. As a student, I disliked it so much that I put off the general history requirement. When you're in college, they have general requirements. I put it off until I was like a junior in college. I mean, I put it off. I did not want to take it. But as a grown man, I recognize that understanding things that have happened in the past that were displayed and shown to us can truly try and help us avoid repeating those incidents. And that is in large respect, I think, why you study history. If not careful, it can repeat itself, can't it? We don't learn from past mistakes. So that's something that I get when I listen to some of these messages, the way that it can most, God helps me glean something. It is good to know the past, and it's good to know the history and why things have happened. I'm not discounting that. Please don't misinterpret. But I want God to help me not fall prey to some sort of spirit that if it hindered others, could it still hinder people? I want to be careful. I have to be careful that I make sure my walk is with him. I want to remain with what it truly means to love Christ and be in his way. And I pray God will help me to never leave that. If you want to look in 1 Timothy 4. And so in my own private time, when you study things and you use resources that, thank the Lord, God has allowed people to make available. And there is a topic, and I'm sure, I feel certain, Pastor Allen, and I can't cover. I'm not a preacher. I'm certainly not a pastor. And this is not a burden of message that has really been laid upon my heart at all. Pastor Allen's doing that for us. That is his responsibility that he's taken as God has given him. So I'm sure he'll get to certain topics when it's appropriate and God shows him. But as we've probably heard some things through our own Christian life. There was a church time that a certain system arose that developed doctrines of their own. They were not good, were they? They were not good at all. For example, forbidding individuals to marry. And the Bible even addresses it, doesn't it? 1 Timothy 4, 1-3. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter time some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their conscience seared with a hot iron, forbidding to marry, and commanding to abstain from meats which God hath created, to be received with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth. Now, the forbidding to marry. So there are doctrines and so forth that have been introduced at certain time periods. They were not healthy and they were not of God, were they? But God's word says it's not good for man to be alone, doesn't it? In Genesis 2:18, and the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him an helpmeet for him. So a religious system that arose at whatever point that was, they developed at whatever time period they did, a man instituted hierarchy. This person's the top. They even bow to that person almost like a substitute God, kissing the ring. Now, is that of God? No. And Pastor Allen will cover those things in due time as God shows him. That is not my responsibility. Thankfully, the Lord can use him for that. But for sake of my lesson today, I want you to take note that when man created this man-instituted hierarchy, some people were lifted to a level of preeminence, weren't they? And that's what spoke to me, thinking about, God forbid, you allow a spirit of preeminence to enter in. And it's scary when that happens, and what people do as a result of feeling that self-imposed preeminence. In 3 John chapter 1, verses 9 and 10, if you will, 3 John chapter 1, verses 9 and 10. I wrote into the church, but Diotrephes, who loveth to have what among them? He loveth to have the preeminence. Now look at what spirit that brought upon him. Receiveth us not. Oh, he decided who he's going to receive, didn't he? Wherefore, if I come, I will remember his deeds which he doeth, prating against us with malicious words. Did he speak highly of the people who were serving the Lord? Nope. And not content therewith, neither doth he himself receive the brethren. Oh, all of a sudden he can decide who he's worth receiving. And forbiddeth them that would. And now he's telling others, don't you associate and receive either. And he goes so far as, what does he do? Casteth them out of the what? Church. Do we have the right to have preeminence and say that to people? No. Beloved, follow not that which is evil, but that which is good. He that doeth good is of God. But he that doeth evil hath not seen God. At some point, and it was either during my personal study time or after, I remember, I think I was maybe in the kitchen area of our home. It hit me. And this is what I gleaned from my private study time. I don't want to have a spirit of preeminence. That's scary, isn't it? Can you imagine getting so far you've decided who's got it and who doesn't? Who's worth associating with and who isn't? Now, I'm not saying don't use godly wisdom when he tells you to be careful with stuff and when you need to separate from something. That's not what I'm talking about. But to become so puffed up and lifted up, everybody's beneath, but boy, if I decided it's true, I thought, how scary. It was a problem during a specific age of time. And it may be easy to read about that or learn about it and just move on. Okay, well, that happened in history. That's what they want. That's what was going on during that time period. However, don't we have a duty to learn from what happened in that past and make sure that we're living as we should? That we don't let that same thing impact us? It's one thing to hear it and listen and say, oh, that's what was going on. That's what that means. Okay. But where does it really produce positive impact? How do I learn from it to help myself? How does God use what I'm hearing and what I'm learning to make sure that I'm living my life correctly, that I'm not letting things come in? I have a duty to learn from it. I pray I never battle a spirit of preeminence, thinking I can decide who has this experience and who doesn't. And I also understand that some things are just wrong, aren't they? We can, as the phrase is, inspect the fruit of what others' lives are producing and say that's not positive, correct? We can have that. Discernment and judgment. I understand that. But I don't want to take it upon myself to think I can weigh everybody's experience and decide whether or not they, quote unquote, have it, meaning a relationship with the Lord. Because are there some people living all the light they know and understand? Absolutely. Do I always know everything they know and understand? I don't know that. It's not my job to feel like I'm the one who knows whether or not they have an experience or not. Yes, I know we are asked and given and endowed as a child of God to know we can inspect the fruit, so to speak. I'm not, and we can say a wrong is wrong. I understand that. I'm not talking about that though. But look at what we can learn from that part of the Bible in 3rd John. Diotrephes became so bold, he thought he could cast people out of the church. Is that not scary? To have such a spirit of preeminence, he can decide who's worthy and who's not. That is a system of, there, a system that institutes that they can banish and so forth. That's scary. People can be wrong. People can just be doing it because they want to do things, or God forbid, you just made somebody upset because you've told them they're wrong, and now they said, well, you don't have any part of this. And all you're doing is judging righteous judgment. But he thought he could cast people out. Who did he think he was? And we can read that and be appalled, but God help me not to develop a spirit where I feel some false sense of superiority and take on the attitude that I can decide, quote unquote, who has it and who doesn't. I think that's scary. And I want to do a visual. I will ask Rhonda Ray to come help me. Anybody know what this is? It's a scale. Now, I'm not going to announce her weight. It's nothing like that. But I want to do an example. What is the purpose of a scale? Tell you how much you weigh. It's to weigh you. You get an idea of where you are, right? So watch this. Okay, Rhonda Ray. Come here. Because there's a flat spot. It's all right. Now, when she steps on these, go ahead. Have I got it upside down? If you'll flip it around, put it on that flat. There we go. So she's going to step on the scales. Okay, and it's working. It gave her a measurement. No. It gave her a measurement. Watch this. No, watch this. Step off and back on. So it's going to reset. Ready? Let's weigh you again. Step on. It hasn't reset. Okay. So what's going to happen if I do this?
That make me heavier.
It's a false reading. I'm adding to the scale. Is it going to be accurate?
No.
What if I say this? Oh, honey, just put hat. No. Put 1 foot. No. 1 foot. That's good enough, ain't it? What have I done now? Is it an accurate reading? No. I've said, don't worry about that. Just take your foot off. That's close enough. Thank you, honey. Mm-hmm. The whole point is, will she get an accurate reading of what she was? Not at all. And I thought about that as an example. For me, for myself, during my private study time, it hit me. I don't want to develop that false sense of preeminence. God is the one who should weigh out people in their experience with him. He knows everything about them. I don't. I can't see their heart. I don't know where their level of understanding may be. I can't take it upon myself to think I can decide who has this and who doesn't all the time, because I could really be a discouragement to someone and others, couldn't I? Think about her scale. If I told her she didn't need that other foot on there and she tells everybody the weight was just part of her body on there, is that going to be accurate? She's living a false hope, isn't she? But what if I put my foot on there? Is that accurate either? I'm weighing her down. She doesn't even need that. That's not even who she is, and it's not even necessary. It's a false reading. I can't decide who has this and who doesn't. I might know some things about an individual, and I could weigh in light of what I understand and know to be true about what it means to serve God, and that can be as fair as I can be. But I can also add some other weights to that balance, trying to weigh out whether or not a person has that experience, couldn't it? When I put my foot on the scale, did that give her actual weight? It would not. It would have skewed the reading. The reading was false because I was interfering. I added to the scale. You know, when you deal with individuals, I got to be careful, don't I? I could add in my own opinions. That tips the scale. I could add in my own impressions. that tips the scale. That's extra weight. I could add in something somebody's told me about that person just because I trust the person who told me. That's extra weight that may not need to be on the scale measuring that individual's sincerity with God. And that's not fair. I'm tipping the scale. What that person told me about that person could skew the actual reading and be totally unfair of the person who's being weighed as whether or not they have this experience. I could introduce false weights and tip that scale also towards what I want to think about that person, couldn't I? You ever think some people only see what they want to see? That can be the truth. And when they weigh that person out, that's the only thing they share. Sometimes people just flat out get called out. Like, I'm sorry, if it's on the workplace, look, you didn't submit this in time. Well, that's not really fair because just hush. Shut your mouth. You're right. I didn't submit it in time. I apologize. Quit trying to tip the scale in your favor. People can do that about themselves, misrepresenting what they say they really are and trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, so to speak, like wolves in sheep's clothing, trying to portray themselves as something they're not. But you know what? Who's the one who can truly weigh that out? God. Because he knows everything about the person. He knows if what I was told about an individual is even true or even fair, doesn't he? And what if it wasn't fair and wasn't even meant to be unfair? I could let that tip the scale of my opinion about that person, couldn't I? And that's not fair. Some people can share things and they put their own opinions in with it. They don't even mean to do wrong, but they can tip the scale when it comes to trying to influence others and their ability to make judgments about people. And that is not fair. I don't need a spirit of preeminence. Well, I got this impression, so obviously that's how it is. What if I'm wrong? What if I misunderstood? One time, Rhonda Ray and I had a situation come up where we were in a situation, and somebody chose to share some things about an individual, and they expressed what I believe they thought were very much concerns. Well, at the time, that was the case. This is how they felt about an individual, to be quite honest. And maybe at some point those concerns were spot on. I don't really know. But I also know, I don't even know if the person who was talking to us was going off total personal experience or maybe things they'd heard because it's someone they trust. I'm really not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe a mix of both. But this is what Rhonda Ray and I have found out. We finally met that person of concern, and the person for us was an absolute blessing. What if we had tipped the scale in favor of just hearing things? We could have judged and weighed that individual as, you can go up with absolute caution when it's unnecessary, can't you? Because the scales have been tipped. Now, I don't think people always mean to do that negatively, but we met the individual and it has baffled us what was shared with us. Just to be honest, in the situation we were in. And maybe that person also feels differently now too. I have no clue. I just know the person that had some concerns, we feel with our experience, has a sincere, tender heart. And this person really wants to serve the Lord. And when that person was speaking to us, probably had pure intentions, and they were speaking to Rhonda Ray and me, she and I chose to be cautious with what we did with what we were told. We chose to be cautious because you just have to be. If she goes out telling somebody she weighs 81 pounds, no offense to my wife, I don't mean it that way. She doesn't weigh 81 pounds. She might have chose to leave 1 foot off. Well, that tipped the scale in her favor. People will do that too, won't they? Oh, I got caught. Oh, I guess I got caught. But you know what? I have a reason for it. I have an excuse for it. Yeah, you tipping the scales sometimes. Don't have that spirit of preeminence. Sometimes you just got to humble yourself and say, oops, I'm sorry. And you know what? It did not work out well. And sometimes things aren't very fair to us. I understand. The other thing can be true. What was the most fair experience Rhonda Ray and I could give the person that we met? That they be weighed with no preconceptions of our own. I didn't need to step on the scale with what I'd been told, what someone else had been told, what someone else had heard or experienced. I had no business bringing that to the scale because I'm skewing the weight. That isn't a true measure of that person necessarily. Sometimes we find out it is, don't we? And sometimes that's the case. But we didn't want to let what we were told influence us when we finally got to meet that person. As a matter of fact, we don't want that to impact us. We wanted to give that person a chance, and I'm so thankful we did. The individual, from what I can tell by inspecting the fruits of the person, is absolutely precious. Now, God knows everything, and it's not my responsibility to know anything more about that person than I do. Why? I don't have the preeminence. It is not my place. Those scales don't belong in Danny's hands. That's scary. Ooh, it gives me chills. They belong in somebody else, and it ain't Danny. It is not my responsibility to weigh this person's sincerity and make a judgment. That belongs to who? God. And I'm so thankful it belongs to Him. I don't have the right to take a spirit of preeminence and go around as if I know everything. I need to be careful about passing judgments on other people. Yes, we can inspect their fruits, and I understand the godly form of judging situations and saying this isn't good and right. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, do we always know everything about an individual? No. But who does? God. And He will be most fair. I'm not talking about you can't call a wrong. Yes, some things are wrong, and some people just may not even know it yet, and they need time to learn. I'm talking and thinking that I do not have the right, to decide who has this experience and who doesn't. I have no right to decide who belongs in God's church and who doesn't. God is the one who can balance the scales and see how our experience weighs out in light of the understanding He has given us. That's a fair balance. He can understand how things weigh out in light of what He knows we understand. He's the one who should do the weighing. Proverbs 16:2, all the ways of man are clean in his own eyes, but who weighs the spirits? The Lord. In Proverbs 16:11, a just weight and balance are whose? The Lord's. All the weights of the bag are His work. You can slip things in. If you were a salesman at a market and you want to make more money, you think you can make the scales capable of cheating people? I'm sure there are ways people can do that. Make a little extra weights, they get a little extra money. Well, the devil would love nothing more than for us to do that with people. Form a little extra opinion here about that person. Or maybe you should mention that concern to some other brother or sister. And before you know it, you're falling prey to spreading things. God help me to be careful. There is none, in 1 Samuel 2:2-3, there is none holy as the Lord, for there is none beside thee, neither is there any rock like our God. Talk no more so exceeding proudly. Let no arrogancy come out of your mouth. God help me. I don't have some spirit of preeminence. For the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by Him actions are weighed. By who? By Him. Yes, you know when some things are wrong. Yes, you can say they're wrong. You know I'm not talking about that, I hope. If man tries to take the responsibility for weighing out someone's experience with God, they, if not careful, can tip the scale in many directions, can't they? Using her as an example now, that was just a scale you step on. It needed time to reset, but you got the point. If it had done a reading, if I put my foot on there, that would have added to the scale, wouldn't it? Well, in some situations, if not careful, I add in my opinion. I add in what I think are my observations. And I'm telling you, you got to be cautious, because something that may be a struggle for Brother Mark may not be for someone else. So if God shows him how to operate and live with that struggle and how to deal with it, He can't necessarily put that off on other people, can you? You could be adding weights to their scale. And now you think it's off balance. Oh, they're not living right, are they? Well, maybe that's not fair. I mean, I know there are universal truths that apply to all of us, but this is also a very individual walk. Work out your own salvation. We each have an individual responsibility. And I don't want to tip the scales. Some people can have it so impossible to live right that no one weighs out as having an experience with the Lord. They can have it so fanatical that nobody's right but them, I guess. I don't know. Or somebody who's just the exact carbon copy. Some people can be so loose that anything can pass as acceptable and be judged as okay with having an experience. But that's not good either, is it? When she took half her body off the scale, is that an accurate weight? Saying, oh, that don't matter. Yeah, your other foot matters. It helps give an accurate reading. You can't leave off things just because you don't want it. And people can try to leave things out because they just don't want to hear the reality and truth of a situation, but that's not how it works. But thankfully, the scales belong with God. I pray for myself when I think about this, that I can see people and their potential, that I don't fall prey to a spirit that makes me think I have some sort of preeminence and can decide who has this experience and who doesn't. Yes, you need godly discernment, and you got to be careful with what and whom you associate with at times. He'll give us direction on that. That's different. That's a whole different scenario. But we need to be fruit inspectors and take care of our own experience first, don't we? I'm talking about, I'm not taking away anything from truth, excuse me. I'm talking about being cautious, making sure I'm not tipping the scale in favor of someone just because I love them. That's my loved one. Or God forbid, taking away from somebody who may be living everything they know. I pray that I would never ever think I can decide who deserves to be a part of God's church and who doesn't. That's terrible. He deals with people with long suffering, doesn't he? When people are tempted to give up, they can tip the scales to, this ain't happening. Well, maybe that's not how God views it. And I need to be cautious. Such matters are not for me. They belong in the hands of someone who can truly be just. And that's really God. We'll be as fair as we know to be, won't we? If we have love in our heart, you'll be as fair as you know to be. But we don't know everything about somebody. I pray that I can be a light to others and I can help them see the love of God and that they can be weighed and found okay when it comes their time because they've chosen to live everything they know for the Lord. We'll end it there. Anybody have any comments or anything? We finished about 3 minutes early.
Real good lesson.
Well, thank the Lord.
Appreciate it.
Well, we'll take a little break before we move on.